Right, welcome to my tutorial on the threes. Right, so the threes. What do they symbolize? Well, the threes are, oddly enough, can be described as 2 plus 1. So they are usually the product of a partnership of some sort. Romance. They are basically partnerships that have produced something. So they're not movement, but they are expansion. They are growth. There's something that has become more of. So there's a growing in that aspect. It can also mean birth, because this is a product of 2. In some cases, like with the 3 of hearts, it can actually indicate actual birth or adoption, to have a pet, that sort of thing. Again, beginning of business relationships and that sort of thing, because 2 people come together and then there's a product. It's in the same light, it also means shared interests, usually small groups. There's a certain sociability of threes because of that whole coming together to produce something. So they tend to be happy and a little playful because it's the start of stuff. There's kind of a growth, a creativity and curiosity, imagination. And they also tend to be fairly energetic because it's the beginning of something. So there's a lot of enthusiasm, self-expression, sometimes through the arts, through business, through goals, a bit of restlessness. Above all, it's also productivity, depending on the card. It can also involve, I mentioned the arts, so it could be writing, speech. Then, of course, with everything else, they also have their negative side. So it's a 3, so it could be a threesome. And before you all jump to conclusions, it can simply be a 3-way, issue. It doesn't necessarily have to be, sex. So it could be a third party, for example, somebody that works against your best interest. That would be the 3 would indicate someone on the outside interfering, let's say, with your relationship of whatever type that it is involved in. It can also mean that you're rather indecisive, or maybe lack of planning, because of this whole enthusiasm and beginning of this new venture. There can be not a lot of time spent thinking about it and planning it. In case of 3 of spades, this also brings in all the self-worry, the doubt. It can also even go so far as being jealousy, hypocrisy, or even intolerance. So it's an exaggerated product between people. It can be self-indulgence. It can also mean distraction, because not actually getting down to doing what you need to do. Right. So, 3 of clubs. Okay. It's a confident card. It's about success. It's about, I call it a sort of a minor success card. It's a minor wish card in a sense, because it's a very, the very beginning of a business or a goal, and it's already very successful. So it is kind of a lot already achieved. I suppose one could say it's luck, but I think it's just good timing. So it can represent a small milestone in development. It's moving forward within the scope of what we are looking at. So within goals, business, that sort of thing. It's moving forward in the sense that it's growing. It's not actual movement as in moving, for example, house or your business to different premises. It's just the growth. So that's the kind of movement that is involved. It also represents practical development. So think of it like an expansion of a situation, usually to do with goals or business. It's also potential for considering future possibilities, and it can also bring about additional work, duties, and so forth, because there's an expansion. So you could find yourself in your career or your job and doing more and more, simply because of that expansion. So you haven't gone to a different job. That will be movement. This would be more like an expansion of the situation. It could also even bring about temporary work. If you're out of work, it could indicate work, even if it's temporary. Then you've got some other sort of meanings that we tend not to use very often, but it could be gardening, planting, it can involve some trips, some traveling, and then, of course, even exploration, even if it's just through the mind, because that's where the whole speech and writing and all of that comes from. So there's exploration without moving. It tends to be a trump card that kind of really puts the rest of the cards more into perspective, and also whether it's kind of a negative read or a more positive spread. So that card can often swing the vote, so to speak. Then we have the Three of Hearts. Like I've said before, it could be pregnancy, it could be adoption, it could simply be the evolution of a relationship. So you meet somebody and it develops. Okay, so that's the development card of that particular relationship. And it has to go somewhere. But this is how it evolves. It grows. It could also be an existing relationship that might go through a rebirth, follow a new path, that sort of thing. It's generally a positive card as well. Most of the threes are positive, except for Three of Spades as always. And it kind of gives you positive outcomes. So it's basically a growing emotional bond. Again, this can also represent, because of the hearts, can represent a small group of people. Sometimes it could even be family, but often it could be business. If it's coupled with business cards, then it can suggest like working well with people, a community of people working, a small community, like a small company, working well together. So it can mean that as well. The three can also represent children, obviously, because the product of the two. But just children in general. It doesn't have to necessarily be a new child, a pregnancy. When you do put it with the Ace of Hearts, then you can start to look at pregnancies, or adoption, if you're specifically looking at that type of a reading. Overall, the Three of Hearts in particular, is about celebration and happiness, and very creative. So it could also be you developing a particular passion, particular art, a particular calling even. The three would see you developing that particular passion into something a lot more creative. The three is also, because it's the embellishment of a situation, it can also be something to be associated with decorating or beautification, On the negative side, it could be a threesome, literally, in a relationship. So, it could be positive, it could be negative, depending on the people, the parent, and the situation. But so, depending how you read it, will indicate that. And of course, your intuition will tell you. Three of Diamonds. I like Three of Diamonds as well, because, again, it speaks about success in business or your career, where the Three of Clubs is success in your goals, generally your goals, and development. The Three is about a developing aspect of your career, or even just security. Diamonds are very much based on security. So it also tells you to, even though you've got the success, to stay focused and don't be distracted by, unimportant things. Just stick with it because you're on a good path. So you want to continue that success. Because it's diamonds and security and finances, it can indicate a small payment, a small increase in finances, a small a pay rise, for example. It's basically a small achievement, although in terms of financial remuneration, because of the sheer numerological size of the card is 3, so it's just a small increase in in financial status. However, any increase is obviously to be welcomed. The Three of Diamonds is also a little bit about recognition. So it's attaining that goal, which is where the financial remuneration comes from. So if you are achieving those goals, you're also being recognized for them. And that's where the increase in security comes from. It can also indicate education or completing education. So you're reaching a milestone where you are completing your education, so you can now go on to your career. So it can also indicate a completion of the education and going on to the next level. For example, if you finish a year or a degree and you go on to your master's, etc., it could indicate something like that, depending again on the question, of course. Now, Three of Spades, we'll leave them for last. The Three of Spades is usually not an easy card to pick up because, again, it depends how the question's asked, and what the spread is will indicate what it means. So it's a change of plans, okay, that work against you in a way. And it's the reason why it's the three is because it's an external influence, which could be the threesome. It could be the third party interfering in your business, your partnerships, or whatever it is. There's an outside interference. So decisions can be made that you can't control and prevent you from doing something or make it incredibly difficult. And depending on the position of the card, if the card is at the end of a spread, then it's pretty it's going to be pretty difficult to get around that. If it's in towards the middle of a spread of a timeline, then it's a hurdle to get over. So you can almost always say it's a three-sided conflict of some sort. It just increases problems and aggravation and that kind of thing. Then again, it can also speak to letting go of the past, letting go of these issues and moving on. Because sometimes we have this three-way issue of some sort, and then we don't let go. So that can be a lingering issue that we need to release. So the external cause of the problems can already be on its way out, and we're still hanging on to it per se. So that's an interesting card. It's usually quite difficult to come to grips with exactly what it means. But it can also be dependency, because you're dependent on something external. There's very much of an external struggle with something externally. So it can lead to disappointment, bitterness, misunderstandings, heartbreaks even, separation. Sometimes cases you could even use it as a divorce card, and just generally loss. However, I don't always look at it as a negative card in the sense that it's doom and gloom. It's just a challenge, like with everything else. Everything is a challenge. So it's just something we need to get past, and then we can get to the other threes. So I hope you enjoy that, and hope to catch you all soon in the next one. And the next one will be the fours.